himself around his knee. Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Isn't found, that war may find its way here.
Me.
They're calling an army.
B. There is only one way.
My back, B!
We stopped them.
They don't understand.
From now on,
Only... And I'm not going anywhere.
Bumblebee, 2018. This text presents a complete set of analyses and explanations regarding the film, delving into its narrative structure, thematic depth, and production context. The film opens with a breathtaking and visceral sequence on Cybertron, a planet consumed by a civil war that feels genuinely apocalyptic. Unlike the fragmented, shiny shards of metal seen in previous live-action iterations, this Cybertron is a textured G1-inspired world of towering spires and deep mechanical shadows, instantly signaling a return to the franchise's roots. The decision to place the viewer directly in the heart of this conflict, framed as a desperate last stand, immediately stakes the film's emotional claim on loyalty and survival rather than mere spectacle. This prequel and soft reboot establishes its protagonist, the Autobot Scout B-127, not as a warrior but as a soldier carrying the weight of an impossible mission. Optimus Prime's command is clear: go to Earth, establish a base, and protect the planet. This directive positions B-127's journey as one of duty devoid of immediate glory, a suicide mission fueled by hope. The film instantly reframes the Autobot presence on Earth from a cosmic accident to a deliberate sacrificial strategy, adding a layer of tragic heroism to the character before we even see him form his bond with humanity. The opening battle on Cybertron serves as a visual manifesto, rejecting the cluttered, metallic spaghetti design of the Bay era in favor of blocky, recognizable, brightly colored robots. The Autobots and Decepticons are instantly distinguishable, and the action, while frantic, is coherently choreographed. The moment Optimus Prime utters his lines in the unmistakable voice of Peter Cullen, the film cements its emotional contract with the audience. It functions as a time machine, transporting older viewers back to 1986 while remaining immediately legible to a child who has never seen a single episode of the Generation 1 cartoon. Arriving on Earth in 1987, the film immediately frames the era not as a backdrop, but as a cultural character. The setting avoids the sleek digital modernity of the 21st century, opting instead for the tactile, analog texture of Walkmans, vinyl records, and bulky cathode ray televisions. This choice reflects the film's core argument. Intimacy can be built from broken, outdated things. The soundtrack, soaked in the sounds of the Smiths, Tears for Fears, and Aha, functions as a surrogate voice box for a character who has lost his own. The music is not decoration but dialogue, expressing what a shattered warrior cannot say aloud in words. The military's introduction through Sector 7 agent Jack Burns marks a significant departure from the jingoistic tone found in earlier franchise entries. Burns is aggressive, paranoid, and obsessed with the perceived threat of the Soviet Union, embodying the post-Cold War anxiety of the 1980s. However, the screenplay, penned by Christina Hodson, wisely refuses to turn him into a cartoonish super soldier. John Cena plays him with a straight-faced, self-aware rigidity that functions as a critique of action hero masculinity. His inability to distinguish between a harmless scout and a Decepticon assassin becomes the film's central political warning against xenophobia. B-127's ambush by the Decepticons' shatter and dropkick is a brutal, intimate sequence that strips the character of his agency and his voice. The destruction of his voice box is a shocking act of violence that transforms the narrative. It immediately reframes the character's arc as a quest to reclaim identity through nonverbal communication, and the film does not shy away from the horror of this mutilation. The sight of a childlike robot clinging to the edge of a cliff, eyes flickering with fear as he tries to speak only to hear static, establishes him not as a weapon but as a victim, forging a psychological wound that mirrors the film's human lead perfectly. Scanning a dilapidated yellow Volkswagen Beetle to escape detection, B-127 collapses into a coma-like state in a seaside junkyard. This is an important symbolic choice. By hiding inside a car that is itself an underdog, a rusty, overlooked machine in an era of flashy Camaros, the film visually harmonizes the robot with its future partner. The junkyard is a graveyard of forgotten memories, a place where things of value wait to be rediscovered. It is the perfect cradle for a friendship built on mutual healing, as both the machine and the girl who will find him are stuck in a liminal space of grief. Hailee Steinfeld's Charlie Watson enters the story on her 18th birthday, but she is in no mood to celebrate. She is introduced submerged in grief, unable to dive into the ocean she once loved because it is tied to the memory of her deceased father. The visual language here is deliberate. Charlie is drowning on dry land. The film's commitment to taking a teenage girl's pain seriously, without condescension or sexualization, is a radical act within a blockbuster landscape that often dismisses adolescent female angst as trivial melodrama. Her trauma is treated with the same gravity as the war on Cybertron. The relationship between Charlie and the damaged beetle she uncovers is a masterclass in nonverbal cinematic storytelling. Upon reviving the robot in her garage, Steinfeld performs a duet with a CGI creation, and the sequence is imbued with a childlike wonder that evokes the golden age of Amblin entertainment. The script understands that the core of the boy and his dog dynamic, reimagined here as girl and her robot, relies on moments of discovery. When the robot tentatively retracts his battle mask to reveal expressive blue optics, the audience is not just watching a special effect. They are witnessing a bond being forged in real time. The decision to name him after the buzzing sound of a damaged radio immediately transforms the high-tech alien into a relatable, almost pathetic creature. The name is not a fearsome codename but an affectionate, improvised pet name, signaling that Charlie is not a military technician but a caregiver. This act of naming is an act of claiming, a redefinition of the entity's purpose. By choosing a small, harmless insect as a namesake, Charlie fundamentally overwrites his programming as a war machine, leaning into the film's central theme that identity is chosen, not assigned. The film's slapstick sequences, where the robot accidentally destroys Charlie's kitchen and hides from her family, are critical to the narrative's emotional architecture. These moments of destruction are played for vulnerability rather than aggression. When the massive alien robot cowers behind a couch or gets distracted by a television, it places the audience in a position of protective superiority. We laugh not at him, but at the sheer absurdity of a giant mechanical organism being terrified of a small family dog, reinforcing the idea that physical size has no correlation with emotional fragility. Director Travis Knight, known for his work at Leica Animation on Kubo and the Two Strings, brings a stop-motion animator's patience to the live-action format. The film's action sequences are not a rapid-fire assault on the senses. but rather clearly framed compositions that allow the viewer to track the transformation of limbs into vehicle parts. The choreography is balletic, with the camera holding on wide shots to let the fight breathe, a stark contrast to the chaotic, mayhem editing that defined the previous 5 films. Shatter and Dropkick distinguish themselves as the franchise's most psychologically menacing villains by leveraging deception over brute strength. Angela Bassett's commanding vocal performance as Shatter oozes cold, bureaucratic malevolence. The Decepticons' plan to infiltrate the military by pretending to be peacekeepers is a sophisticated tactic that exploits the human tendency toward binary thinking. They manipulate Sector 7 into hunting their fellow Cybertronian by framing him as a fugitive, a plot point that adds a layer of political satire regarding the ease with which fear overrides due diligence in government institutions. The concept of triple changers is leveraged brilliantly in the antagonist's design. Their ability to switch between robot, jet, and ground vehicle modes gives the action scenes a kinetic unpredictability that had been missing from the franchise. When Dropkick transforms into a helicopter mid-chase, it is not just a spectacle, but a narrative power move that isolates the heroes. The integration of these mechanical forms is seamless, reinforcing the physical versatility of the Decepticons compared to the damaged, limping Autobot scout, shifting the stakes from a fair fight to a desperate escape. Memo, played by Jorge Lendeborg Jr., serves as the supportive neighbor who illustrates a different kind of normal teenage anxiety. If Charlie represents deep, identity-shaking grief, Memo embodies the awkwardness of unrequited affection and the search for purpose in a dead-end town. He is never positioned as a savior, but as a loyal friend who earns his place in the narrative. His presence diffuses the potential for an overly heavy tone, providing gentle comic relief that stems from character interaction rather than gratuitous, leering jokes. The film's family dynamic is rendered with a painful realism that complicates the standard dead parent trope. Charlie's mother, Sally, and her new partner, Ron, are not villains. They are frustratingly nice, desperately trying to connect with a girl who has walled herself off from them. The birthday sequence, where Charlie receives a helmet that clashes with her sense of self and accidentally takes a book on smiling as a passive-aggressive gift, is deeply relatable. The screenplay understands that the tragedy of losing a parent is often compounded by the guilt of resenting the living ones who remain. Charlie's technical skill as a mechanic is not treated as a quirky superhero trait. It is a legacy of her father's love. Every time she picks up a wrench to fix the Corvette or repairs her new friend's leg, she is accessing a tactile memory of her dad. The garage is her sanctuary, a place where logic and grease replace the messy, ungovernable chaos of human emotions. The film celebrates mechanical competence as a form of intelligence, positioning the teenage girl who can strip an engine as the one person capable of healing a warrior from beyond the stars. One of the film's most poignant sequences involves the robot learning to communicate using the radio dial and cassette deck. The choice of songs is deeply diegetic, emanating from the objects Charlie loves. When he plays I Can't Help Myself by the Four Tops or Unchained Melody by the Righteous Brothers, he is not just generating random noise. He is curating an emotional response. This creates a linguistic system based on shared taste, a secret language of mixtapes that bypasses the need for verbal syntax and dives straight into pure melodramatic feeling. The physical setting of the California coast, with its golden hour lighting and boardwalk arcades, provides a visual warmth that contrasts the cold metal of the robots. Director of photography Enrique Chidiac bathes the frame in a nostalgic glow, suggesting a paradise that is already fading. The cliffside roads and beaches are presented as a liminal space where the terrestrial meets the infinite ocean, mirroring Charlie's psychological state of being caught between the solid ground of moving on and the terrifying depths of her unresolved grief. When the character activates a holographic message from Optimus Prime, the narrative transposes the mission from the macro scale of planetary defense to the micro scale of emotional necessity. The message is a literal projection of hope, a reminder that the Autobots are counting on him. The visual of a towering, blue-hued Optimus speaking directly into a dusty garage links the intimate domestic space with the cosmic war, suggesting that Earth is not a random mudball, but the future sanctuary of a resistance movement, elevating the sleepy town to a crucial front line. The Decepticons' use of satellite technology to hunt for their target taps directly into 1980s techno-paranoia, where the invisible magic of signals and networks could spell doom. The film plays with the irony that the same radio waves carrying music and joy are also the beacons that attract genocidal hunters. This duality of technology, as a source of connection and a tool of surveillance, adds a layer of sophistication to the otherwise simple story, reminding the viewer that the analog golden age had its own profound anxieties about the coming digital world. The high-speed chase along the winding coastal roads is a direct homage to the car chase cinema of the era, using practical stunt driving mixed seamlessly with CGI. The physics of the action feel weighty, unlike the weightless flips of later Transformers films. Tires screech on asphalt, and guardrails buckle realistically, grounding the science fiction elements in tangible danger. The narrow roads and steep cliffs keep the tension high without the need for citywide annihilation, proving that a smaller scale can yield far greater anxiety in an audience. The film's emotional fulcrum rests on the moment Charlie nearly drowns, and the yellow robot must overcome his wiring to save her. Water, a symbol of Charlie's deepest trauma, becomes the site of her rescue. The inversion here is profound. The machine, who cannot swim and whose body is crippled by submersion, dives into the abyss to save the girl who taught him how to live. It is a baptism scene that cleanses Charlie of her father's death without erasing it, allowing her to resurface with the will to fight. Shatter's interrogation of the captured protagonist is a chilling inversion of the film's earlier warmth. Angela Bassett's performance exudes a regal, sadistic contempt. By hanging the Autobot upside down and extracting his memories, she frames his sentimental bond with Charlie as a tactical weakness to be exploited. This scene visually quotes the memory extraction motifs of classic science fiction, arguing that consciousness and connection are mere data points to the Decepticons, a philosophy that the film's heart-centered narrative stands firmly against. John Cena's Agent Burns undergoes a silent but significant transformation when he witnesses the Decepticons' betrayal. Up until this point, Burns has been a rigid antagonist, but the moment he sees his soldiers vaporized by the very aliens he trusted, his ideology shatters. It is a redemption arc that occurs not through dialogue, but through the dawning horror on Cena's face. He recognizes that his blind obedience to the state has made him complicit in evil, a realization that the screenplay handles with surprising efficiency for a family film. The climax at the harbor and radio tower is an operatic fusion of industrial infrastructure and mortal combat. The setting, a launching point for signals into the sky, acts as a nexus between Earth and the cosmos. The chain-link fences, massive cranes, and explosive energy of the signal beacon provide a playground for the fight that feels gritty and lived in. When Dropkick finally meets his demise, ripped apart by chains, it is a cathartic release of physical tension built up over the film's second half, a demise that is gruesome enough to feel satisfying but stylized enough to remain appropriate for younger viewers. The destruction of Shatter and the collapse of the beacon form a final statement on the film's themes of communication. The Decepticons wanted to use the Earth's infrastructure to call down an apocalypse. Their defeat signifies the destruction of a toxic colonial signal. What remains in the wreckage is not a burning city block, but a quiet, personal victory. The stakes have always remained intimate. Saving a friend, not saving the world, even though the latter ends up being a happy byproduct. Charlie's final dive off the cliff into the ocean marks the complete restoration of her character arc. It is an action performed alone, for herself, without the robot or her father. The film wisely separates her healing from her mechanical friend's presence. By conquering the water, she internalizes the lesson of courage. Steinfeld plays the moment with a quiet smile of self-recognition, indicating that the robot, like a good parent or teacher, has given her the tools to stand on her own. The reunion with her adoptive family, where Ron finally says exactly the right thing, is the film's true happy ending. It is not a romantic kiss on a battlefield, but a stepfather acknowledging his stepdaughter's pain. This normalization of a blended family is a mature and rarely seen resolution in teen cinema. The narrative insists that the family you build, even through awkward birthday helmets and tense breakfasts, is as vital as the one you lost, emphasizing that biological connection is not the sole determinant of love. The parting scene on the hillside is a masterwork of restrained special effects emotion. The yellow robot touches his crest to Charlie's forehead, a gesture of intimacy that transcends the metallic divide between them. The film looks directly into the uncanny valley and fills it with tears. It is a goodbye that knows it is also a hello to the wider world. The camera frames the two figures against the expansive Pacific Ocean, suggesting that their story is not ending, but expanding into the infinite horizon of the future. The film's design of Optimus Prime and his fellow Autobots arriving on Earth in the final moments is a triumphant teaser that serves the narrative without overshadowing the central duo. These G1, accurate designs dropping into the atmosphere confirm that the cavalry has arrived, but they do not steal the glory. The film understands that its emotional payload has already been delivered. Optimus is the cherry on top, a promise that the franchise has a new, emotionally intelligent path forward. From a cinematographic standpoint, the film serves as a rejection of the desaturated, high-contrast action style of the late 2000s. The color grading is full of teal skies, orange sunsets, and bright, primary-colored robots that pop against the muted background of Charlie's suburban life. This visual clarity is a metaphor for the moral clarity of the story. There are good characters, there are bad ones, and the nuanced messiness exists only in the human heart, not in the faction emblems. The use of the Smith's girlfriend in a coma is not just a needle drop, it is a textual joke and a thematic anchor. The song's title literalizes the robot's initial state when Charlie finds him. This level of deliberate musical curation elevates the soundtrack from nostalgic wallpaper to a narrative-driven jukebox musical. Each lyric underscores an emotional beat, teaching the audience to listen with the same acute sensitivity as the character parsing radio waves for a soul. The film's reliance on practical effects for the Beatles' transformation sequences pays homage to the analog special effects of the 80s it emulates. There is a tactile crunch to the shifting panels that feels more like a Rubik's Cube of metal than a fluid digital morph. This physicality makes the robot feel like a tangible object in the real world, grounding the impossibility of his existence in the weight of his footsteps and the shadow he casts across Charlie's driveway. Hailee Steinfeld's performance is the load-bearing beam of the entire enterprise. She acts against a tennis ball for much of the shoot, yet her eyes track the digital creation with a consistency that sells the illusion flawlessly. She never performs at the robot, she always performs to him. Her comedic timing during the chaotic house destruction scenes, combined with her ability to cry without maudlin excess, crafts a protagonist who is tough because she is vulnerable, not in spite of it. The film subtly critiques the military-industrial complex's penchant for seeing every anomaly as a weapon. Sector 7's labs are filled with alien artifacts, yet they learn nothing about empathy from them. The organization represents a sterile, analytical way of knowing that contrasts with Charlie's hands-on, empathetic approach. She fixes with love, they dismantle with fear, a duality that drives the plot's philosophical engine and validates a feminine, collaborative approach to the unknown over a masculine, combative one. The Decepticons' motto of rising up to conquer serves as a dark mirror to the Autobots' motto of freedom. The film clarifies the ideological stakes of the Cybertronian war without bogging down in lore. It is a simple, binary struggle that gains complexity only through the actions of the characters in the middle. Agent Burns stands exactly on this fault line. A man whose desire to protect has been twisted by doctrinal fear into a desire to oppress, making his eventual pivot a moral victory for diplomacy. The decision to make the character a mute for the majority of the runtime is a brave screenwriting choice that pays dividends. It forces the visual effects team to develop an intricate system of antennae movements, optic dilations, and body posture to convey emotion. When he tilts his head like a curious puppy or hangs it in shame, the animation transcends its code to become a pure expression of sentience, making the audience forget they are rooting for a heap of yellow metal and wires. Charlie's dead-end job at the hot dog stand and her longing for a car represent the claustrophobia of the unlaunched life. The film is deeply sympathetic to the feeling of being 18 with a specific, marketable skill, but no capital or respect to deploy it. Her fixing of the Corvette is an attempt to jumpstart a connection to a dead father, but it is a dead-end project. The gift of the Beetle, a machine that actively gives back, breaks her out of this stasis and rewards her mechanical empathy with kinetic partnership. The film's reputation as a soft reboot was not just a marketing tactic, but a structural necessity. By setting the story in 1987, the creative team physically insulated the plot from the convoluted, world-ending continuity of the sequels that came before it. This temporal quarantine allows the story to breathe, to be small, and to end on a note of hope rather than an explosion of special effects. It was a confession that the franchise had grown too large and too loud, and that the cure was a smaller, simpler song. Bumblebee is a cinematic argument against cynicism. in an era where legacy sequels often rely on meta-commentary and winking deconstruction. This film plays its 80s setting and emotional beats completely straight. It believes in the power of a mixtape, the warmth of a hug, and the idea that a car can be a best friend. This sincerity is its most disarming quality, a shield against critical cynicism that made it the highest-rated live-action entry in the franchise's history on aggregators like Rotten Tomatoes. The film's treatment of trauma as a wound that needs a witness, not a fix, is its most sophisticated psychological insight. Charlie does not need her new friend to fight her battles. She needs him to sit in the garage and listen. When she finally tells him about her father's heart attack and her guilt over not performing CPR correctly, the robot simply listens. His silence is a form of unconditional acceptance, a non-judgmental space where a teenage girl can finally be not okay. The product placement, while present, is sutured into the 80s setting so deeply that it circles back into authenticity. The Rubik's Cubes, the Atari games, and the specific brands of audio equipment are not just advertisements. They are archaeological artifacts that build the texture of Charlie's room. They locate her in a specific moment of technological adolescence, just as she herself is in a moment of biological adolescence, bridging the gap between a pop culture past and a mechanical, futuristic visitor. The climactic battle's use of chains to drag a Decepticon to pieces is a callback to the tactile, industrial violence of classic monster movies. It is not a clean laser blast, but a dirty, physical dismemberment that relies on the environment. This choice grounds the final fight in a reality the audience can feel, emphasizing the blue-collar, working-class aesthetic of the junkyard and harbor. The message is clear. Even the most advanced alien technology can be undone by good old-fashioned leverage and a strong chain. The film's post-battle quiet scenes are arguably more important than the battles themselves. Charlie's decision to let her friend go, to choose his Autobot family over her personal need, is an act of mature love. It mirrors a parent letting a child leave for college, acknowledging that love is not possession but the support of destiny. The sequence reframes the entire film as a foster story, where a broken girl fostered a broken alien, healed him, and sent him back into the world a fully realized hero. John Cena's silent salute to the Camaro as it drives away signals the final collapse of his militarized worldview. Without a single line of dialogue, Cena communicates respect for an enemy he was hunting hours before. This salute is a soldier's ultimate concession, a recognition of honor in the other. It is a small gesture that opens the door for Sector 7 to become the ally seen in future continuity, bridging the gap between the reboot's tone and the established timeline with elegant simplicity. From a production design standpoint, the massive scale difference between the fragile human form and the towering robots is maintained with consistent logic. The humans never feel like they can punch their way out of a fight with a Decepticon, which maintains the sense of danger. They have to be clever, use the environment, or rely on their Autobot guardian, preserving the power dynamic that makes the bond between a small organic being and a giant mechanical one so inherently dramatic and precious. The film's understanding of loneliness is universal and cuts across species. The shot of the robot sitting alone in the junkyard, half buried and rusting, is a portrait of abandonment. This image does not need sci-fi context. It is a postcard of despair that any human who has felt discarded can recognize. The film mines this shared state of neglect to build a bridge between a human teenager and an extraterrestrial robot, arguing that the feeling of being left behind is the same chemical reaction, whether in a heart or a spark core. The final transformation into the 1977 Camaro is a visual orgasm for the fanbase, but it also serves a narrative function beyond nostalgia. By shedding the damaged Beetle shell, the character visually completes his healing arc, which was facilitated by Charlie's mechanics. He is no longer a junker. He is a sleek, powerful symbol of the road ahead. Yet, the film implies that the gentle Beetle personality remains underneath the new paint job, suggesting that the trappings of power do not necessarily erase the wounds that created them. The film's handling of the Cold War tension through Sector 7's paranoia is a smart way to ground the alien conflict in a historically specific human folly. The threat of the Soviets, mentioned repeatedly by Burns, is a red herring that blinds the agency to the real threat collaborating right inside their bunkers. This is a timeless cautionary tale about the danger of fighting the last war while ignoring the present one, a political subtext that is subtle enough for children to miss but resonant for adults. The cinematography captures the scale of the robots with a child's perspective, often placing the camera low, looking up in awe. When the robot first stands fully upright in Charlie's driveway, the shot holds from her eye level, letting his massive yellow frame fill the screen. This perspective shifting is crucial for the film's theme of innocence. We are forced to see the wonder of the machine through the eyes of a young girl who has forgotten how to wonder, effectively reteaching the audience how to see with fresh eyes. Bumblebee understands that a blockbuster can be a quiet, character-driven picture masquerading as a special effects extravaganza. The final hug between the girl and the robot is the true climax of the film, a piece of physical acting that no explosion can rival. By prioritizing this moment over the spectacle, the film delivers on a promise that the franchise had broken repeatedly in the past. The promise that the relationships between the species matter more than the destruction they cause. The film's critical and commercial success proved that the audience was not tired of the concept of transforming robots, but was exhausted by the manner in which they had been presented. By restoring a sense of wonder, injecting genuine humor that did not demean the audience, and anchoring the plot to a powerful human story of grief, the creative team did more than save a franchise. They wrote a manual on how to course-correct a sinking blockbuster ship without abandoning the brand's identity. The legacy of this installment is that it remains a standalone masterpiece of family science fiction, a film that can be watched without any prior knowledge of a 16-film universe. It tells a complete story of a girl who finds a broken car, fixes it, discovers it is an alien, teaches it to speak through pop music, stops an invasion, and learns to swim again. This elegant narrative arc, stripped of bloat, is the key to its success, proving that in an age of interconnected cinematic universes, a simple, well-told story retains the maximum power. The film's opening sequence, in which the main character flees the fall of Cybertron, immediately establishes an emotional through-line of survival against overwhelming odds. The neon glow of laser fire reflects off shiny, cartoon-accurate metal bodies, creating a sequence that is both a tactical retreat and a visual love letter. It signals to the viewer that the director understands the weight of this mythology, treating the destruction of an alien homeworld not as a visual afterthought, but as a traumatic, foundational event that echoes through the quiet moments to come on Earth. The sound design during the arrival on Earth is a careful blend of otherworldly hums and familiar 80s static. The contrast between the clean, digital sounds of Cybertron and the crackling, analog distortion of a boombox encapsulates the central aesthetic tension of the film. This auditory friction mirrors the narrative fusion occurring on screen. The organic, messy sounds of a Walkman clicking closed are granted as much dramatic weight as the metallic footfalls of a war machine, suggesting that the human world is just as valuable a sonic landscape as the cosmic one. The film's depiction of its central robotic figure is deeply rooted in the physical comedy traditions of Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. When the character hides in plain sight by compressing his frame into a corner or accidentally crushes household objects, the choreography relies on timing and geometry rather than dialogue. This silent-era physicality gives the film a timeless quality, ensuring that the humor does not age because it relies on the fundamental laws of physics clashing with an alien body in a human space. The casting of Hailee Steinfeld is a masterstroke because she possesses an innate ability to project inner turmoil without hysterics. Her performance anchors the film in a reality that the visual effects can support but never overshadow. The audience identifies with her desire to fix things, a desire that extends from car engines to her own splintered heart. When she wields a wrench, it is a defensive gesture as much as a practical one, keeping the world at bay by engaging with its more predictable mechanical components. The film's depiction of the high school world, though brief, is efficiently sketched. The popular girls who mock Charlie are not villains. They are just background noise in a life that has hit a more serious bass note. The film understands that for someone carrying the weight of a dead parent, teenage social hierarchies seem absurdly trivial, and the script wastes no time pretending that Charlie needs to win the approval of her peers. Her real growth lies in reconnecting with a family she feels she no longer deserves. The Decepticons, Shatter and Dropkick, operate with a terrifying synergy that many action films fail to achieve with their villain duos. Shatter is the calculating brains, a femme fatale politician who understands that humans are easily swayed by authority and projected honesty, while Dropkick is the feral muscle. Their triple-changing capabilities are not just visual gimmicks, but tactical assets that reflect their personalities. Aerial, unpredictable, and violently adaptable, making them feel like a genuine threat rather than a cardboard obstacle. The film's production design team meticulously recreated the look and feel of a 1987 coastal town, but crucially, they did so without irony. The wood-paneled walls, the pastel colors, and the oversized electronics are not presented as a joke. They are presented as the warm, comfortable nest of Charlie's childhood, a sanctuary that has become a prison because it is frozen in time. This visual refusal to mock the era allows the audience to sink into the nostalgia, accepting it as the present-tense reality of the characters rather than a retro pastiche. The decision to make the memory loss and voice box damage a central plot point reconfigures the character from a soldier into a newborn. Every interaction in the garage functions as a miniature milestone of child development. The moment he discovers the radio, he is effectively learning to speak for the second time. This blank slate approach allows the film to bypass the convoluted history of the franchise, giving the protagonist a fresh start that mirrors the audience's potential introduction to the series. The bond between the girl and the robot is consistently built on gestures of care rather than exchanges of information. When Charlie wraps a chain around his hand to pull him up or tapes a headlight back into place, she is performing a mothering function that heals her own lack of maternal comfort. The robot, in turn, offers physical protection not as a programmed bodyguard, but as a friend who leans into danger. This mutual caretaking erases the boundary between the organic and the synthetic, establishing a symbiotic relationship based on reciprocal vulnerability. The film's soundtrack functions as a form of emotional telepathy, with the robot using songs to articulate feelings he cannot form with his own vocal cords. When he plays The Touch by Stan Bush, it is a direct nod to the 1986 animated film, but narratively, it is the robot telling Charlie she has the power to overcome her trauma. The music licensing is so perfectly married to the script that the songs feel written for the scenes, transforming the compilation soundtrack into an original score of popular memory. The visual effects team achieved a remarkable feat by making the robot's face, essentially a rigid metal mask, register complex emotions. The subtle dilation of the optical sensors, the angle of the metal brows, and the flick of the antennae combine to create a face that acts. The digital artists clearly studied puppy dog eyes and silent film stars, merging animalistic charm with mechanical detail. This expressiveness is the backbone of the film's emotional appeal, as the audience must fall in love with a being who cannot smile or frown in human terms. The film's third act is a relentless chase that masterfully escalates the stakes while maintaining geographic clarity, a rare feat in modern action cinema. The sequence involving the helicopter transformation on the bridge is a high point of tension, using the confined space to amplify the claustrophobic panic of being hunted by a flying predator. The editing allows the audience to track the movement across the screen, ensuring that the spatial relationship between the fleeing Autobot and the attacking Decepticon is never confusing, which keeps the adrenaline focused and the fear palpable. The small coastal town setting serves as a microcosm of the planet at large. By containing the conflict within this seaside bubble, the film avoids the numbness that comes with global destruction. The local fair, the quiet pier, and the single radio tower feel like a fragile ecosystem that the audience desperately wants to protect. When the beacon threatens to summon an army, the audience does not just think of the abstract Earth. They think of the specific donut shop and the boardwalk where Charlie skips stones, making the threat feel immediate and personal. Bumblebee treats the Autobot code and the Prime Directive not as convenient plot devices, but as sacred texts. The robot's refusal to harm humans, even when Sector 7 is actively attacking him, is a crucial moral stand that defines the character. This pacifistic streak does not make him weak, it makes him principled. The film posits that true strength lies in restraint, and that the Autobots' protective mandate is what separates them from the Decepticons more than any physical weapon, a theme that resonates far beyond the confines of a genre film about warring aliens. The reconciliation between Charlie and her mother is not a grand, tearful speech, but a quiet acknowledgement of mutual failure. The moment her mother admits she does not know how to fix her daughter's pain, the distance between them collapses into a shared grief for the man they both lost. It is a subtle, beautifully written scene that acknowledges the collateral damage of loss on a family unit. The stepfather, Ron, steps into this breach not with authority, but with a gentle presence that signals his permanent, supportive role in their lives. The film's final shot, with the yellow Camaro driving alongside a red Freightliner semi-truck on the Golden Gate Bridge, is a promise fulfilled. It connects the intimate road trip of Charlie's journey to the epic scale of the Autobot saga. The image of the scout and the leader together, set to an instrumental swell, is a tableau of a new family unit ready to face the future. It is a perfectly pitched ending that gives closure to Charlie's story, while opening the door to the infinite possibilities of the open road and the battles to come, satisfying both the standalone narrative and the franchise architecture. The intersection of military protocol and adolescent recklessness creates a volatile cocktail that propels the middle act forward with unpredictable energy. John Cena's Burns operates under the assumption that procedure can neutralize the unknown. Yet every time his clipboard and chain of command clash with the organic chaos Charlie represents, the film argues that improvisation trumps bureaucracy. The Sector 7 bunker sequences, filled with alien artifacts cataloged like mundane inventory, visualize an institution that has mistaken classification for understanding, setting the stage for an inevitable collapse of their rigid epistemological framework when faced with a creature who defies their binary of weapon or target. The film's relationship with the original Generation 1 cartoon extends far beyond cosmetic homage into the realm of spiritual restoration. Where the Michael Bay films treated the source material as an embarrassment to be hidden beneath layers of alien biomechanics, Travis Knight approaches the blocky, colorful designs as sacred texts worthy of resurrection. The Cybertron sequence operates as a form of cinematic reparations, giving an entire generation of fans the live-action experience they had imagined while playing with their Hasbro toys in living rooms across America, validating a childhood dream that had been deferred for over a decade of cinematic adaptations. Hailee Steinfeld navigates the film's tonal shifts with a precision that suggests she understands Charlie not as a character in a robot movie, but as the protagonist of a quiet indie drama who happens to wander into a science fiction spectacle. Her tears never feel manipulative, her laughter never feels forced, and her mechanical competence feels earned rather than written as a hollow gesture toward female empowerment. When she diagnoses an engine problem by ear or rigs a makeshift repair, the film trusts the audience to accept her expertise without defensive exposition, treating her skill as an inherent aspect of her identity rather than a plot point that requires justification. The Decepticon infiltration of human institutions introduces a layer of political allegory that the franchise had previously only gestured toward with sledgehammer subtlety. Shatter's manipulation of Sector 7 functions as a cautionary tale about the seduction of authority figures by voices that tell them exactly what they want to hear. She arrives bearing the rhetoric of interplanetary cooperation while planning planetary subjugation, and the humans, desperate to be players on a cosmic stage, swallow the lie without chewing. The film positions this gullibility not as individual stupidity, but as systemic failure, a breakdown of skepticism that happens when institutions prioritize their own relevance over truth. The junkyard where Charlie discovers the damaged Beetle functions as a liminal space between abandonment and rebirth, a purgatory of rusted potential waiting for the right pair of hands. Every crushed chassis and scavenged part tells a silent story of obsolescence, making it the perfect incubator for a friendship between two discarded entities. The owner's casual generosity in gifting the car carries the weight of folktale tradition, the wise elder who recognizes a destined pairing and steps aside to let fate unfold. This narrative economy trusts the audience to understand symbolic weight without underlining it in dialogue. The film's visual effects achieve a breakthrough in mechanical empathy by treating the robot's metal skin as a translucent window into an emotional interior rather than an opaque shell. Micro-expressions ripple across the faceplates, antennae droop and perk like expressive ears, and the optical sensors dilate with recognizable curiosity or fear. This character animation team, likely drawing from Knight's Leica experience with stop-motion puppets, understands that audiences connect to faces regardless of their material composition. The result is a digital creation that outacts many human performers in contemporary blockbusters, generating genuine protective instincts in the viewer. The soundtrack selection process reveals a curatorial intelligence that elevates the film above mere nostalgia bait. Each song choice performs multiple functions simultaneously, establishing period, conveying emotion, advancing character, and winking at the audience with lyrical commentary. When Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears plays during a moment of Decepticon scheming, the irony is accessible to adults without alienating children who simply hear a catchy tune. This layered audio strategy rewards repeat viewings, as the soundtrack becomes increasingly legible as a parallel narrative track commenting on the visual action. Charlie's relationship with her late father's Corvette represents a grief that has calcified into ritual, a mechanical shrine that she maintains without progress. The car sits in the garage like a patient on life support, and her weekly visits to tinker with it have become a form of prolonged mourning that prevents forward motion. The film gently critiques the stasis without condemning it, understanding that grief has its own timeline and that sometimes a person needs an external catalyst to break a cycle they cannot break alone. The arrival of the Beetle provides that catalyst by demanding active engagement rather than passive memorialization. The military's tracking technology in the film occupies an interesting middle ground between analog and digital, reflecting the transitional period of 1987. Radar screens glow with green phosphorescence, radio triangulation requires human interpretation, and satellite networks are vulnerable to atmospheric interference. This technological vulnerability creates opportunities for escape that would not exist in a fully digital surveillance state, giving the heroes breathing room and maintaining the tactile, pre-internet texture that makes the film's world feel like a place where secrets can still be kept and friendships can still develop without algorithmic detection. The character of Memo serves a function beyond comic relief by modeling a different form of masculinity than either the militaristic Burns or the silent robotic warrior. He is nervous, eager to please, physically unimposing, and utterly devoid of toxic bravado. His crush on Charlie is presented without entitlement. He accepts his position in the friend zone with grace and continues to support her mission without expecting romantic reward. This depiction of a teenage boy who channels attraction into genuine friendship rather than resentment is quietly revolutionary in a genre often defined by possessive male gazes. The film's approach to violence carries a moral weight that distinguishes it from the consequence-free destruction of many blockbusters. When characters are injured, they remain injured, carrying their damage into subsequent scenes rather than resetting for the next action beat. The robot's damaged leg, Charlie's bruises, and the scars on the military personnel all serve as visual reminders that combat has costs. This physical continuity creates stakes that feel earned rather than manufactured, making each subsequent encounter with the Decepticons carry the accumulated anxiety of previous wounds. The coastal geography of the film's setting provides a visual metaphor for the threshold between known and unknown, safe and dangerous, terrestrial and cosmic. Charlie's inability to dive into the ocean represents her fear of the unknown depths, while the Decepticons' arrival from the sky represents an invasive threat from above. The climax at the harbor, where land meets sea meets broadcast tower, brings these spatial anxieties into collision, forcing every character to confront the boundary they have been avoiding and either cross it or be consumed by it. The production design of Charlie's bedroom functions as a time capsule that reveals character through environmental storytelling. The posters on her walls, the state of her desk, the tools scattered among teenage detritus, all of it builds a portrait of an adolescent caught between childhood passions and adult responsibilities. The room feels lived in rather than set-dressed, with the kind of authentic clutter that comes from genuine occupation rather than a prop master's idea of teenage chaos. This attention to environmental detail grounds the fantastical elements in a reality the audience can smell and touch. The film's handling of the voice box destruction and subsequent radio communication creates a unique linguistic system built from pop cultural detritus. Each radio clip becomes a phoneme, each song selection a sentence, and the cumulative effect is a language of pure emotional transfer that bypasses the ambiguities of verbal communication. When the robot strings together a message from multiple stations, the technical cleverness of the editing mirrors the cognitive effort of constructing meaning from fragments, a process that Charlie and the audience participate in together as active interpreters rather than passive receivers. The Decepticon plan to use Earth's communication infrastructure as a beacon for invasion weaponizes the same technology that enables human connection. This thematic symmetry, the radio waves that carry love songs and distress calls are the same waves that could summon an apocalypse, creates a moral ambiguity around technology that the film explores without resolving. The message is not anti-technology but pro-discernment, suggesting that the tools themselves are neutral and that the character of their users determines whether they broadcast liberation or oppression. The film's pacing follows a classical three-act structure that prioritizes breathing room over relentless momentum. The first act takes its time establishing Charlie's emotional landscape before introducing the fantastical element, trusting that an audience invested in a character will follow her anywhere. The second act alternates between bonding sequences and escalating threat, building a rhythm of safety and danger that makes both modes more effective through contrast. The third act delivers spectacle, but only after earning the emotional investment that makes spectacle meaningful rather than merely loud. The decision to set the film in 1987 rather than the present day is a strategic choice that frees the narrative from the burden of contemporary technology. Smartphones, social media, and constant connectivity would make the clandestine friendship between Charlie and the robot impossible to sustain. The analog era provides a plausible isolation that allows secrets to remain secret, creating a hothouse environment where their bond can develop without the constant threat of digital exposure. The period setting is thus not merely nostalgic window dressing, but a functional requirement of the plot's central relationship. John Cena's performance as Burns evolves subtly across the film's runtime, moving from rigid antagonist to reluctant ally without ever betraying the core of the character. His initial hostility is grounded in a coherent worldview. Aliens are threats, the military exists to neutralize threats, and deviation from protocol invites disaster. When evidence forces him to revise this position, Cena plays the cognitive dissonance as physical discomfort, a man whose body rejects a truth his mind cannot deny. His final salute is earned precisely because the journey to that gesture has been so difficult. The film's climactic confrontation between Charlie and Shatter presents a battle between two radically different philosophies of strength. Shatter embodies hierarchical, dominating power that sees attachment as weakness and mercy as inefficiency. Charlie embodies networked, relational power that draws strength from connection and sees vulnerability as the foundation of courage. Their showdown, mediated through the robot, becomes a proxy war between these worldviews, and the film's unambiguous endorsement of Charlie's position is a thematic statement that elevates the action beyond choreography into argument. The visual effects team's integration of practical explosions and digital characters achieves a seamless blend that preserves the tangibility of 1980s action cinema. Debris flies with real-world physics, smoke behaves like actual smoke rather than digital approximations, and the interaction between animated robots and practical environments avoids the weightless float that plagues less careful CGI integration. This technical discipline ensures that the audience's eyes never reject a shot as fake, maintaining the illusion that allows emotional investment to persist during the most fantastical sequences. The film's treatment of memory as both gift and burden runs parallel through both the human and robotic protagonists. Charlie is haunted by the memory of her father's death, unable to escape the loop of that traumatic moment. The robot has lost entire swaths of memory to damage, struggling to reconstruct his identity from fragments. Their friendship becomes a mutual restoration project, with Charlie providing the emotional continuity the robot lacks, and the robot providing the forward momentum Charlie cannot generate alone. Together, they assemble a present worth inhabiting from the shattered pieces of their pasts. The franchise's long-standing problem with female representation is addressed not through proclamation, but through the simple act of taking Charlie seriously. She is not a conquest, a prize, or a decorative element framed in slow motion. She is the protagonist, full stop. Her mechanical skills are not a surprise twist, but an established fact. Her emotional journey is the A-plot, not a subplot wedged between robot fights. This quiet normalization of female competence and interiority is more effective than any amount of self-congratulatory girl power dialogue could ever be. The film's understanding of scale extends beyond the physical dimensions of its characters to encompass the scope of its stakes. By keeping the threatened area small, a single town, a specific family, a particular friendship, the film makes the danger feel larger than films that destroy entire cities without emotional impact. The potential loss of Charlie's mother or memo registers more viscerally than the CGI obliteration of faceless millions, because the film has done the work of making those specific people matter. This inversion of blockbuster logic, where smaller stakes feel bigger, is the film's most subversive structural achievement. The robot's weapon systems are treated not as cool accessories, but as tragic necessities, a visual reminder that this gentle creature was built for war. When his arm transforms into a cannon, the moment is played with a hesitation that acknowledges the gravity of violence. The film never celebrates the capacity for destruction. framing each deployment of weaponry as a reluctant last resort rather than a fist-pumping moment of badassery. This restraint makes the action sequences more impactful precisely because the film has established that its hero would rather not fight. The supporting cast of Sector 7 scientists and soldiers are sketched with enough individuality to avoid functioning as faceless cannon fodder. Each minor character is given a moment of recognizable humanity, a nervous tick, a skeptical glance, a flash of doubt that makes their peril matter. When Decepticons vaporize soldiers, the film acknowledges the loss rather than treating it as disposable background noise. This ethical treatment of even antagonistic characters reflects a directorial sensibility that values life, a sensibility that permeates every frame of the film. The film's use of silence is as sophisticated as its use of music. The quiet moments in the garage, where Charlie simply sits with the robot and communicates nothing in particular, build intimacy through shared presence rather than verbal exchange. These scenes understand that friendship is built in the spaces between events, in the accumulated weight of simply being together. The film trusts silence to carry meaning, a trust that few blockbusters are confident enough to extend. The integration of humor into the narrative fabric avoids the quippy, self-aware tone that has come to dominate contemporary blockbuster cinema. The jokes arise from character and situation rather than ironic commentary on the genre. When the robot causes chaos in the house, the comedy comes from his genuine curiosity and Charlie's genuine panic, not from a winking acknowledgement that they are in a movie. This sincerity makes the humor warm rather than distancing, inviting the audience to laugh with the characters rather than at them. The film's color palette evolves across its runtime, moving from the cool, desaturated tones of Charlie's grief to the warm, golden hues of her healing. The early garage scenes are lit with a practical, fluorescent harshness that reflects her emotional rawness. As the friendship deepens, the lighting shifts toward the magic hour glow of the California coast, culminating in a final sequence bathed in the amber light of a sunset that signals closure and new beginnings simultaneously. The mechanical design of the Beetle form carries symbolic weight beyond its nostalgic value. The Volkswagen Beetle is an underdog car, associated with the counterculture of the 1960s and the humble practicality of the working class. It is the opposite of the sleek, aggressive muscle cars that typically populate action films. By choosing this form, the robot aligns himself with the marginalized and the modest, a visual statement of values that precedes any verbal communication. The eventual upgrade to a Camaro is earned only after he has proven that his character is not defined by his chassis. The film's portrayal of teenage alienation avoids the cliché of blaming the teenager for their isolation. Charlie is not moody because of hormones. She is grieving because her father died. The film takes her emotional state seriously as a rational response to circumstance, rather than dismissing it as adolescent dramatics. This respect for teenage interiority is rare in mainstream cinema and contributes to the film's cross-generational appeal, validating the experiences of younger viewers while reminding older viewers of the intensity of their own adolescent emotions. The Decepticon design philosophy, which emphasizes sharp angles, predatory silhouettes, and cold metallic finishes, creates a visual contrast with the Autobots' rounded, warm, colorful aesthetic. This design language functions as a moral taxonomy, allowing the audience to distinguish friend from foe at a glance, even during the most chaotic action sequences. The clarity of this visual system is a rebuke to the murky, indistinguishable robot designs of previous franchise entries, where determining who was fighting whom required squinting through a flurry of shiny metal shards. The film's treatment of its 1980s setting extends to its approach to cinematic grammar, consciously evoking the editing rhythms and camera movements of Spielberg's Amblin productions. The wide shots of suburban streets, the low-angle perspectives from a child's point of view, and the use of lens flares as emotional punctuation all reference a specific tradition of family filmmaking that the movie seeks to revive. This stylistic quotation is not mere pastiche, but a functional toolkit for generating the sense of wonder that the narrative requires. The character of Ron, Charlie's stepfather, represents the film's commitment to avoiding easy villainy. He could have been a wicked stepfather trope, a convenient antagonist for Charlie to resent. Instead, the film presents him as a genuinely decent man trying to navigate an impossible emotional situation with patience and love. His awkward attempts at connection, his refusal to take Charlie's rejection personally, and his ultimate breakthrough in the film's final act model a form of masculine care that is supportive without being domineering. The film's climax at the radio tower literalizes the theme of finding one's voice in the most direct way possible. The structure that broadcasts signals across the globe becomes the arena where the characters must decide what message they will send into the universe. Will it be a Decepticon call for conquest or an Autobot signal of hope? The physical destruction of the tower carries symbolic weight, suggesting that the old channels of communication must be demolished before new, more authentic forms of expression can emerge. The robot's loyalty to Charlie is tested not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent choices that accumulate into an unbreakable bond. Each time he could flee or fight for self-preservation, but instead chooses to protect her. The film reinforces the idea that love is a series of decisions, rather than a single dramatic declaration. This portrayal of loyalty as a practice rather than an emotion gives the relationship a maturity that transcends the typical boy and his dog template towards something approaching genuine partnership. The film's post-credits implications ripple backward through the narrative, recontextualizing the entire story as the first chapter of a larger saga. The knowledge that the Autobots will eventually establish a full presence on Earth transforms Charlie's garage from a simple repair shop into the cradle of a resistance movement. Her small act of kindness toward a broken machine becomes, in retrospect, the pebble that starts an avalanche, a reminder that world-changing events often begin with individual decisions made in obscurity. The philosophical question at the film's core asks whether beings of different origins can truly understand one another, and answers with a cautious but heartfelt affirmative. The communication between Charlie and the robot transcends species, planet of origin, and even the boundary between the organic and the mechanical. Their friendship stands as an argument against xenophobia in all its forms, suggesting that empathy is a universal language that requires no translation, and that the capacity for connection is not limited by the composition of one's body. The film's commercial success, grossing nearly $500 million on a restrained budget, proved that the audience appetite for Transformers content had not diminished, but had merely been exhausted by excess. By offering a smaller, more emotionally resonant experience, the film attracted viewers who had long since abandoned the franchise while retaining enough action spectacle to satisfy the existing fanbase. This commercial validation of the film's artistic choices sent a message to the industry that blockbuster fatigue is often franchise fatigue, and that reinvention through intimacy rather than escalation is a viable path to renewal. The legacy of this film within the broader Transformers mythology is still unfolding, but its immediate impact was to demonstrate that the property could support radically different tones and narrative approaches. It opened the door for a more diverse slate of stories set in the same universe, proving that the brand was bigger than any single directorial vision. Future installments will operate in the shadow of this film's achievement, measured against its standard of character-driven spectacle and its insistence that the robots be characters rather than props. The film's ultimate argument is that healing comes through service, that fixing others is sometimes the only way to fix oneself. Charlie cannot heal her own grief by directly addressing it, so she heals it indirectly by pouring her mechanical skills and emotional capacity into repairing a broken alien. This circuitous path to recovery acknowledges the truth that trauma does not respond to direct assault, but often dissolves when the traumatized person becomes absorbed in caring for someone else. The film's gentle wisdom on this point elevates it from entertainment to something approaching therapy, a blockbuster that understands the quiet mechanics of the human heart. The quietest moment in the entire film, a single shot of the robot's hand, massive and metallic, carefully cradling Charlie's much smaller, organic hand, encapsulates its entire thesis in a single frame. The image communicates protection without domination, difference without distance, and affection without words. It is a tableau that could hang in a gallery of science fiction art, a visual poem about the possibility of gentleness across the vast, cold distances of space and the equally vast, equally cold distances that can open between two people standing in the same room. The film's treatment of transformation, the franchise's signature gimmick, reimagines it as a vulnerable act rather than a display of power. When the robot shifts from vehicle to bipedal form, the sequence is often framed as an uncurling, a protected creature emerging from a shell to reveal its soft interior. This reframing of transformation as exposure rather than armament aligns the mechanical metamorphosis with the emotional metamorphosis Charlie undergoes, linking the physical and psychological arcs through shared imagery of emergence from protective shells. The decision to cast Peter Cullen as the voice of Optimus Prime for the brief Cybertron scenes functions as an act of continuity maintenance that honors the character's legacy. Cullen's voice carries decades of emotional association for fans, and its presence, even in a cameo, sanctifies the film's connection to the broader mythology. His delivery of lines about hope and survival lands with the weight of a benediction, a passing of the torch from the original animated series to a new generation of storytellers who understand what made those cartoons resonate. The film's depiction of Sector 7 as an organization in its early, bumbling stages provides a comedic counterpoint to the threat of the Decepticons. The agents are not the slick, omniscient operatives of later timeline entries, but fumbling bureaucrats in over their heads, making mistakes that have catastrophic consequences. This portrayal demystifies the shadowy government agency trope, suggesting that the people who police the boundary between the known and unknown are often just as confused as everyone else, armed with protocols that crumble on contact with genuine anomaly. The thematic resonance between Charlie's loss of her father and the robot's loss of his home planet creates a parallel structure that deepens both characters. Orphanhood becomes the shared language through which they recognize each other, a mutual understanding of what it means to be cut off from one's origins and forced to navigate a world that was not designed with one's survival in mind. This doubling of loss transforms the film into a meditation on displacement, making the science fiction premise a vehicle for exploring the universal human experience of homesickness for a place that no longer exists. The film's final act of parting is structured as a mutual release rather than an abandonment. Charlie does not lose her friend. She gives him permission to fulfill his larger purpose. The robot does not forget Charlie. He carries her forward into his future as an internalized presence. This understanding of separation as a form of love, rather than its negation, is a mature emotional insight that the film trusts its young audience to grasp. It teaches that growing up sometimes means letting go, and that letting go is not the same as losing. The coastal California fog that rolls through several key sequences serves as a visual metaphor for the ambiguity that the characters must navigate. Visibility is limited, shapes are indistinct, and threats could emerge from any direction. This atmospheric uncertainty forces the characters to rely on senses other than sight, on sound, on intuition, on trust, creating a sensory environment where the logical and the instinctual must work in tandem. The fog lifts only in the film's final scenes, a meteorological signal that clarity has been achieved and the path forward is now visible. The film's integration of practical stunt work with digital augmentation maintains a baseline of physical reality that prevents the action from becoming abstract. Stunt performers in partial robot suits provided reference for movement. Real cars were destroyed in real collisions, and the digital artists built upon these practical foundations rather than replacing them. This hybrid approach, common in the best modern effects work, but absent from many effects-heavy blockbusters, ensures that the physics of the film's world remain internally consistent even as impossible beings populate its frame. The arc of Agent Burns from antagonist to ally is structured around his gradual recognition that the categories he has relied upon, human and alien, friendly and hostile, civilized and savage, do not map cleanly onto reality. His worldview, shaped by Cold War binaries, crumbles when confronted with evidence that the universe is more complex than his training allows. This intellectual humility, hard-won through violence and betrayal, transforms him from a figure of fun into a figure of potential growth, a reminder that even the most rigid minds can change when reality refuses to conform to their expectations. The film's treatment of class, while subtle, is woven into the fabric of Charlie's situation. She works a service job, cannot afford a car, and lives in a modest home in a small town. Her mechanical genius is a gift that cannot be monetized because she lacks the credentials and connections to enter professional spaces. The robot's arrival is not just an emotional gift but an economic one, providing her with transportation, agency, and access to a wider world that her class position had foreclosed. This material dimension of their friendship adds a layer of social realism to the fantastical narrative. The Decepticons' cruelty is distinguished by its casual, bureaucratic quality. Shatter does not rage, she administers. Her violence is procedural, a matter of efficiency rather than passion. This depiction of evil as methodical rather than maniacal is more disturbing than any amount of screaming villainy, because it connects the fantastical antagonists to real-world systems of oppression that operate through paperwork and protocol rather than visible malice. The banality of Shatter's evil makes her a more relevant villain for a contemporary audience attuned to the dangers of institutional dehumanization. The film's commitment to character-driven pacing means that the action sequences, when they arrive, feel like releases of tension that the drama has carefully accumulated. The audience does not check out during the dialogue scenes, waiting for the next explosion, because the dialogue scenes are where the film's real work occurs. The explosions are merely the punctuation, the exclamation points at the end of sentences that the quieter scenes have written. This rebalancing of the blockbuster formula, making the quiet moments the substance and the loud moments the accent, is the film's most important formal innovation. The robot's radio voice, assembled from fragments of popular songs and broadcast clips, functions as a form of poetry made from found materials. Each selection reveals a new facet of his personality, a new emotional register that his damaged vocal apparatus cannot produce natively. This collage method of communication is inherently creative, an act of bricolage that transforms passive consumption of media into active self-expression. The film celebrates this remix culture as a legitimate form of language, a way of speaking through the voices of others that is not derivative but generative. The relationship between Charlie and her younger brother Otis is sketched with an economy that suggests a lifetime of shared history. His annoyance at her moodiness, her irritation at his presence, and the underlying affection that peeks through their bickering all feel observed rather than invented. When Otis becomes a minor participant in the robot's secret, his reaction, excitement without comprehension, is perfectly pitched for his age, adding another layer of authentic family dynamic to a film that never treats family as a simplistic source of either comfort or conflict. The film's final image, a wide shot of a Camaro and a semi-truck crossing a bridge into an uncertain future, carries the weight of myth. It is an image that suggests continuation beyond the frame, lives that will be lived after the credits roll, adventures that the audience is invited to imagine but not witness. This open-endedness is a gift, a refusal to foreclose possibility in favor of tidy resolution. The story continues, the film acknowledges, but it continues without us, a bittersweet recognition that even the most satisfying endings are also beginnings that we will not see. The critical consensus that greeted the film upon release, surprised that a Transformers movie could be good, and not just good but genuinely moving, reflected a low bar that the franchise had set through years of diminishing returns. The film cleared that bar with room to spare, proving that the problem had never been the concept of transforming robots, but the execution, the tone, and the priorities that had governed previous adaptations. In doing so, it provided a template for franchise rehabilitation that extends beyond its specific property, a case study in how to return to first principles without sacrificing scale. The film's true subject, beneath the robots and explosions and 80s needle drops, is the labor of emotional repair. Every character is broken in some fundamental way, and every plot development moves them incrementally toward a wholeness that they cannot achieve alone. This emphasis on mutual healing, on the idea that damaged people can fix each other if they are brave enough to try, is the film's deepest resonance. It offers a vision of community that is not about finding perfect people, but about finding people whose broken edges fit together with your own, creating something stable from shared fragility. The relationship between the visual and the verbal in the film's storytelling tilts decisively toward the visual, trusting images to carry narrative weight that dialogue would only dilute. The robot's emotions are conveyed through animation, not explanation. Charlie's grief is conveyed through Steinfeld's physical performance, not confessional monologue. This show-don't-tell discipline elevates the film above the overwritten, exposition-heavy tendencies of contemporary blockbusters, allowing the audience the dignity of interpreting what they see rather than being told what to feel. The film's portrayal of the 1980s as a time of both innocence and danger avoids the trap of pure nostalgia. The Cold War anxiety that permeates the military subplot, the economic precarity of Charlie's family, and the looming threat of environmental degradation all lurk at the edges of the frame. The past is not idealized but rendered as a complex, textured reality, a place where the music was great and the threats were real, and the people were just as lost as they are in the present, searching for connection in a world that did not come with instructions. The film's opening sequence on Cybertron employs a desaturated, metallic color palette punctuated by the vivid primary hues of the Autobots and the sinister purples of the Decepticons, instantly establishing a visual morality that requires no translation. The camera swoops through canyons of chrome and steel with a fluidity that conveys the scale of a planetary civilization in its death throes, each explosion illuminating a world that feels ancient, lived in, and irreplaceable. This prologue functions as a thesis statement, arguing through imagery alone that the war being depicted is not a clash of ideologies, but a genocide, a desperate flight of refugees from a homeland that has already fallen into the abyss of total war. Optimus Prime's decision to send B-127 to Earth rather than a more experienced soldier reveals a strategic calculus that prioritizes survival over firepower. The scout is expendable in the brutal mathematics of war, yet Optimus invests him with a mission of profound importance, suggesting that leadership sometimes means entrusting the impossible to the least likely candidate. This dynamic, established in a handful of lines delivered with Peter Cullen's gravitas, echoes the mentorship themes that will later develop between the amnesiac robot and Charlie, creating a chain of guidance that links Cybertron's highest command to a teenage girl's garage. The film's representation of B-127's fall to Earth is choreographed as a birth rather than a crash landing, his escape pod tearing through the atmosphere like a meteor, while onlookers below mistake the event for a shooting star. The imagery of a burning object plunging into the wilderness, pursued by hostile forces, deliberately invokes the iconography of the stranded alien, a being cast out of heaven and into a world too primitive to understand him. This mythic framing elevates the character from a mere robot to an archetypal figure, a fallen star who must learn to shine again through human connection. The film's opening sequence on Cybertron employs a desaturated, metallic color palette punctuated by the vivid primary hues of the Autobots and the sinister purples of the Decepticons, instantly establishing a visual morality that requires no translation. The camera swoops through canyons of chrome and steel with a fluidity that conveys the scale of a planetary civilization in its death throes, each explosion illuminating a world that feels ancient, lived in, and irreplaceable. This prologue functions as a thesis statement, arguing through imagery alone that the war being depicted is not a clash of ideologies but a genocide, a desperate flight of refugees from a homeland that has already fallen into the abyss of total war. Optimus Prime's decision to send B-127 to Earth rather than a more experienced soldier reveals a strategic calculus that prioritizes survival over firepower. The scout is expendable in the brutal mathematics of war, yet Optimus invests him with a mission of profound importance, suggesting that leadership sometimes means entrusting the impossible to the least likely candidate. This dynamic, established in a handful of lines delivered with Peter Cullen's gravitas, echoes the mentorship themes that will later develop between the amnesiac robot and Charlie, creating a chain of guidance that links Cybertron's highest command to a teenage girl's garage. The film's representation of B-127's fall to Earth is choreographed as a birth rather than a crash landing, his escape pod tearing through the atmosphere like a meteor, while onlookers below mistake the event for a shooting star. The imagery of a burning object plunging into the wilderness, pursued by hostile forces, deliberately invokes the iconography of the stranded alien, a being cast out of heaven and into a world too primitive to understand him. This mythic framing elevates the character from a mere robot to an archetypal figure, a fallen star who must learn to shine again through human connection. The Sector 7 military unit that engages B-127 in the forest operates with the twitchy hypervigilance of men who have been trained to see everything unknown as hostile. Their attack, launched without provocation or communication, establishes the film's critique of preemptive violence as a self-fulfilling prophecy. By firing first and asking questions never, the soldiers transform a peaceful scout into a fugitive, creating the very threat they feared through the act of trying to neutralize it. This tragic irony reverberates through the subsequent narrative, coloring every interaction between the military and the Autobots. The Decepticon triple changers shatter and dropkick pursue B-127 with a methodical cruelty that distinguishes them from the manic, shrieking villains of previous franchise installments. Their interrogation of the dying scout is clinical, almost surgical, extracting intelligence with the detached efficiency of surgeons who view their patient as a specimen rather than a sentient being. Angela Bassett's vocal performance as Shatter layers honeyed menace over steely calculation, a voice that could sell you salvation while signing your death warrant, making her perhaps the most psychologically complex Decepticon ever rendered on screen. The destruction of B-127's voice box at the hands of the Decepticons is depicted with a visceral horror that the film refuses to soften. The sound design of tearing metal, the flickering of optical sensors, and the distorted static that replaces speech combine to create a moment of bodily violation that registers as genuinely traumatic. This is not the clean, consequence-free violence of Saturday morning cartoons, but a mutilation that carries permanent consequences, transforming the character's subsequent silence from a narrative convenience into a wound that the entire film will labor to heal. The junkyard where the damaged beetle lies dormant for months is rendered as a liminal space suspended between decay and renewal, a landscape of oxidized metal and encroaching vegetation where human abandonment has created an accidental sanctuary. The owner, a peripheral figure who nonetheless catalyzes the entire plot through his gift of the car, represents the role of casual generosity in the architecture of destiny. His willingness to part with a seemingly worthless vehicle sets in motion a chain of events that will determine the fate of two worlds, a reminder that epic narratives often hinge on small kindnesses offered without fanfare. Charlie's mechanical aptitude is introduced not through dialogue but through action, her hands moving across engine components with the assured muscle memory of someone who has spent thousands of hours in the garage. Hailee Steinfeld's physical performance during these sequences conveys competence through gesture, the way she grips a wrench, the angle at which she peers into an engine bay, the satisfied nod that follows a successful diagnosis. This embodied knowledge positions her as a legitimate peer to the Cybertronians, a human whose intelligence operates in the same practical, problem-solving register as their own. The film's portrayal of grief as a physical weight that Charlie carries is externalized through Steinfeld's posture, her shoulders slightly hunched, her gaze often directed downward, her movements economical in a way that suggests the conservation of depleted emotional resources. She does not perform sadness so much as inhabit it, wearing her loss like a heavy coat that she has forgotten how to remove. This somatic approach to depicting trauma allows the audience to feel Charlie's pain kinesthetically rather than merely understanding it intellectually. The moment of the robots awakening in Charlie's garage is staged as a first contact scene stripped of alien menace and filled instead with mutual terror and fascination. The robot, compressed into a corner, optical sensors darting around an unfamiliar environment, resembles nothing so much as a frightened animal that has been cornered. Charlie's approach, slow and deliberate, palm extended, voice modulated into soothing tones, draws on the universal language of creature companionship, a behavioral script that transcends species and, the film suggests, even planetary origins. The film's comedic centerpiece, in which the robot attempts to hide from Charlie's family while inadvertently destroying the living room, is a masterclass in physical comedy choreography. The robot's size relative to the domestic space creates a geometry of absurdity, his massive frame attempting to compress itself behind furniture designed for humans, his metal limbs knocking over lamps and shattering picture frames with each panicked adjustment. The sequence pays homage to the tradition of the disruptive houseguest, from Harvey the Invisible Rabbit to E.T., while establishing the robot's childlike innocence through his genuine distress at causing damage. The discovery of the radio as a communication tool transforms the robot from a passive recipient of care into an active participant in the relationship. Each song selection becomes an utterance, a deliberate choice that reveals personality, humor, and eventually deep affection. The moment he plays a romantic ballad in response to Charlie discussing her feelings is a joke that also contains a profound truth. He is listening, he understands, and he is responding with the vocabulary available to him, a vocabulary that Charlie has herself provided through her cassette collection. The film's integration of The Touch by Stan Bush, a song indelibly associated with the 1986 animated film, functions on multiple levels simultaneously. For longtime fans, it is a recognition of their loyalty, a promise that this film remembers and honors what came before. Within the narrative, it is the robot accessing a memory of heroism, a fragment of his pre-trauma identity that surfaces through music. For new viewers, it is simply a rousing anthem that amplifies the emotional stakes of the moment. The song's ability to operate across these registers without contradiction exemplifies the film's inclusive approach to its audience. The Decepticons' infiltration of Sector 7 headquarters is rendered as a political drama, with Shatter deploying the language of interstellar diplomacy to manipulate human institutions. Her offer of technological exchange for assistance in capturing a fugitive exploits the military's desire for advancement and their predisposition to view aliens through a carceral framework. The scene functions as a satire of counterterrorism rhetoric, demonstrating how easily the language of justice can be weaponized to serve annihilation when the accused is denied the opportunity to speak in their own defense. The alliance between the Decepticons and Sector 7 creates a dramatic irony that generates mounting tension throughout the film's middle act. The audience, aware of the Decepticons' true nature, watches as the military resources that should be defending Earth are redirected toward hunting its would-be protector. This misalignment of force and intention transforms every Sector 7 vehicle and soldier into an unwitting extension of Decepticon will, a visual representation of how institutions can become instruments of evil while believing themselves to be forces for order. John Cena's physical performance as Agent Burns draws on his wrestling background to create a character whose body constantly communicates aggression, even when his dialogue remains professionally neutral. The set of his jaw, the squared shoulders, the way he occupies space as though preparing for impact, all suggest a man whose entire physiology has been conditioned for confrontation. This embodied militarism makes his eventual moment of hesitation, when evidence begins to contradict his assumptions, visible as a crack in his physical certainty before it manifests in his words. The character of Memo functions as an audience surrogate whose journey from skepticism to belief mirrors the transformation the film hopes to effect in its viewers. His initial reaction to discovering the robot, incredulity followed by rapid acceptance, acknowledges the absurdity of the premise while granting permission to embrace it. Jorge Lendeborg Jr. plays these reactions with a sincerity that prevents the character from becoming mere comic relief, grounding his enthusiasm in the recognizable desire of a teenage boy to be part of something larger than his circumstances. The film's chase sequences utilize the geography of the California coast with a precision that transforms the landscape into an active participant in the action. The winding cliffside roads impose constraints on the pursuit, the tunnels create moments of blindness and revelation, and the industrial infrastructure of the harbor provides vertical dimension to the climactic battle. This integration of environment and action ensures that each set piece feels specific to its location rather than generic, a quality that distinguishes memorable action cinema from the interchangeable. The robot's memory recovery sequences, depicted as fragmented flashes of light and sound, visualize the experience of trauma recall with impressionistic intensity. Images of Cybertron's fall, Optimus Prime's face, the Decepticon attack, all surface as disconnected shards that gradually assemble into a coherent narrative of loss. This representation of memory as mosaic rather than linear record aligns with contemporary understanding of how the brain processes traumatic events, lending psychological realism to what could have been a purely mechanical plot device. The film's treatment of the Corvette that belonged to Charlie's father transforms a static prop into a dynamic symbol through the evolution of Charlie's relationship to it. Initially, the car is a shrine, maintained without progress, a physical manifestation of arrested grief. As the narrative progresses and Charlie begins to heal through her friendship with the robot, the Corvette recedes in prominence, no longer the central object of her mechanical attention. By the film's end, it remains unfinished but no longer oppressive, a project that can wait rather than an obligation that consumes. The Decepticon plan to construct a beacon using Earth's communication infrastructure transforms the planet's technological development into an unwitting collaboration in its own potential destruction. Every radio tower, every satellite dish, every cable carrying information across the globe becomes a potential weapon when repurposed by hostile intelligence. This recontextualization of familiar technology as latent threat taps into anxieties about infrastructure vulnerability that resonate beyond the film's 1987, setting into contemporary concerns about cyber warfare and technological dependency. The film's action choreography emphasizes physical vulnerability over invulnerable spectacle, with both the Autobot protagonist and the Decepticon antagonists taking visible damage that accumulates across encounters. Limbs are damaged, armor is dented, and systems fail progressively rather than catastrophically, creating a sense of attrition that raises the stakes of each subsequent confrontation. This commitment to consequence ensures that violence carries weight, that each blow matters, and that the audience remains invested in the physical integrity of the characters. The decision to give the Decepticons the ability to speak, and to speak eloquently, transforms them from monsters into adversaries with comprehensible motivations. Shatter's monologues about Decepticon supremacy are chilling precisely because they are articulate, because they present a coherent, if abhorrent, worldview. This rhetorical dimension to the villainy forces the Autobots and their human allies to confront not just physical force, but an ideology, making the conflict one of ideas as well as weaponry. The film's use of water imagery throughout Charlie's arc creates a visual motif that tracks her psychological journey with poetic precision. The ocean she cannot enter, the shower where she cries, the hose water that sprays during a comedic moment, and finally the dive off the cliff at the film's conclusion all form a liquid through line that maps emotional states onto elemental interaction. This systematic deployment of imagery demonstrates a directorial attention to visual storytelling that rewards attentive viewing. The robot's transformation from Volkswagen Beetle to Camaro at the film's conclusion is not merely a cosmetic upgrade, but a symbolic graduation from disguise to identity. The Beetle was a hiding place, a camouflage chosen in desperation. The Camaro is a statement, a form chosen from confidence and self-knowledge. This distinction matters because it reframes the signature franchise gimmick, transformation, as an expression of interiority rather than a tactical adaptation, giving mechanical metamorphosis a psychological dimension it had previously lacked. The film's portrayal of the 1980s as a pre-digital landscape of analog technology enables a version of the hidden alien narrative that would be impossible in a contemporary setting. Without smartphones, social media, and ubiquitous surveillance, the robot can remain concealed in Charlie's garage, their friendship developing in genuine privacy. This technological quarantine creates a temporal bubble where secrets can be kept and trust can be built slowly, conditions that contemporary connectivity has largely foreclosed. The supporting performance by Pamela Adlon as Charlie's mother Sally conveys the exhaustion of a woman who has lost her husband, rebuilt her life, and now faces the daily challenge of loving a daughter who has retreated beyond her reach. Adlon plays Sally not as neglectful but as bewildered, a mother who remembers the child her daughter used to be and cannot locate that child in the surly, distant teenager who sits across the breakfast table. Her frustration is rooted in love, and the film honors that complexity. The film's climax at the harbor and radio tower synthesizes the narrative's thematic concerns into a single, legible conflict. The Decepticons seek to use Earth's voice to call destruction from the stars. The Autobot and Charlie fight to preserve the planet's right to speak for itself. This literalization of the film's preoccupation with voice and silence transforms the final battle into an allegory for self-determination, with the collapsing beacon representing both a victory over external threat and a reclamation of communicative autonomy. The robot's relationship to violence is characterized by reluctance that the film never frames as weakness. Each time he deploys his weapons, the moment is preceded by visible hesitation, a beat of consideration that honors his core programming as a protector rather than a warrior. When he finally fights with lethal intent against the Decepticons, the escalation feels earned because the audience has witnessed the provocation that made it necessary, transforming his violence from a character default into a character choice. The film's treatment of Charlie's mechanical skills as a form of inheritance from her father transforms a character trait into a thematic statement about legacy. Her ability to repair the robot is not an inexplicable gift, but the continuation of knowledge passed down through shared labor, a living connection to the father she lost. Every successful repair is simultaneously a practical achievement and a communion with the dead, a way of keeping her father present through the continued application of what he taught her. The cinematography during the underwater rescue sequence employs a desaturated, almost monochromatic palette that transforms the familiar California coastline into an alien landscape as strange as any Cybertronian vista. The muffled sound design, the slow-motion descent of debris, and the play of light through murky water create a dreamlike texture that externalizes Charlie's near-death experience while providing the robot with an arena for heroism that is as hostile to him as Earth itself once seemed. The film's epilogue, in which Charlie reunites with her family and the robot assumes his new form, is structured as a series of goodbyes that are also beginnings. Each farewell, to the Beetle form, to the garage sanctuary, to the secrecy of their friendship, opens a door to a new configuration of relationships. The robot joins the larger Autobot community, Charlie integrates into her blended family, and both carry forward the transformation they have effected in each other, now internalized as permanent change rather than circumstantial arrangement. The Decepticon Dropkick's helicopter mode provides the film with a visual antagonist that operates on a different axis than the ground-based heroes, creating aerial threat that forces creative problem-solving. The sequence in which he transforms mid-pursuit, rotors folding into limbs while maintaining forward momentum, represents the seamless integration of vehicle and robot modes that the franchise has always promised but rarely delivered with such clarity. The choreography ensures that the audience can track the transformation, appreciating its mechanical logic rather than being overwhelmed by its complexity. The film's understanding of adolescence as a period of profound vulnerability masked by defensive posturing informs every aspect of Charlie's characterization. Her sarcasm is armor, her mechanical obsession is a retreat from the social demands she cannot meet, and her resistance to her mother's new relationship is a loyalty to a past she cannot release. The film does not pathologize these responses but contextualizes them, inviting empathy for a stage of life that popular culture often reduces to stereotype. The robot's rediscovery of his combat capabilities occurs in parallel with Charlie's rediscovery of her emotional courage, the two arcs tracking each other with structural precision. As she becomes more willing to confront her grief, he becomes more willing to confront his enemies. This synchronization of growth suggests that their bond is not merely supportive but transformative, that each is unlocking capacities in the other that isolation had suppressed. The film's set design for the Sector 7 facility, with its concrete walls, harsh fluorescent lighting, and institutional furniture, creates an environment that visually opposes the warmth of Charlie's home. The bunker is a space of control, classification, and containment, a sterile laboratory where the unknown is dissected rather than embraced. This spatial contrast between the film's two primary settings externalizes the thematic conflict between fear-based and love-based responses to difference. The climactic image of the radio tower collapsing into the sea carries the weight of multiple symbolic readings. It is the destruction of the Decepticon threat, the silencing of a voice that would have called down apocalypse. It is the end of the film's central conflict, the resolution of the physical danger that has driven the plot. And it is a burial at sea, a committal of the film's violence to the depths, clearing the stage for the quieter resolutions that follow and ensuring that the final emotional notes are not drowned out by the echo of explosions. The film's final exchange between Charlie and the robot, conducted through a mixture of radio clips, physical gestures, and the shared vocabulary of their friendship, encapsulates the unique language they have built together. No outside observer could parse the conversation, but the audience, having witnessed the entire arc of their relationship, understands every nuance. This private language is the film's ultimate testament to the bond it has depicted, a communication system forged in shared experience that proves connection is possible across any divide. The critical and commercial performance of the film served as a referendum on the direction of the franchise, with audiences and reviewers alike signaling a preference for character over spectacle, clarity over chaos, and emotional authenticity over ironic detachment. The film's success opened a pathway for subsequent installments to explore different tones and storytelling modes, demonstrating that the brand was more resilient and flexible than its previous uniformity had suggested. In this sense, the film did not just reset continuity but reset expectations. The film's legacy within the broader landscape of franchise cinema extends beyond its specific property to serve as a case study in course correction. By identifying the core elements that originally made the concept resonant, the wonder of a child discovering a friend, the clarity of good versus evil, the tactile pleasure of transformation, and stripping away the accumulated excess of a decade of escalation, the film provided a template for how to rehabilitate a property that had lost its way. Its influence can be traced in subsequent franchise entries from other studios that similarly sought to return to emotional fundamentals. The quietest moment in the film's third act, a brief pause between the climax and the denouement, in which Charlie and the robot share a look that contains everything that needs to be said, demonstrates the power of restraint in a genre that often confuses volume with impact. The look holds for a beat longer than convention would dictate, allowing the accumulated emotion of the preceding 2 hours to settle into the silence. It is a moment of pure cinema, a communication that bypasses language entirely and speaks directly to the audience's investment in these characters. The film's score, composed by Dario Marianelli, weaves original themes with the emotional textures of the needle drop soundtrack to create a sonic tapestry that honors both the period setting and the timeless nature of the story being told. The orchestral passages that accompany the Cybertron prologue and the film's most emotional moments provide a grounding weight that balances the pop-inflected energy of the 80s hits, ensuring that the film's musical identity is cohesive rather than fragmented. The relationship between the film's scale and its budget represents a philosophical choice as much as a financial one. By working with a smaller budget than previous franchise entries, the filmmakers were forced to prioritize character interaction over spectacle proliferation, to earn their action sequences through dramatic buildup rather than deploying them as default punctuation. This constraint became a creative virtue, producing a film that feels intimate even at its most expansive, personal even at its most cosmic. The film's depiction of the Autobot code of ethics, which prohibits harming sentient life regardless of species, establishes a moral framework that distinguishes the heroes from the villains with philosophical clarity. This code is not merely stated but demonstrated, tested, and ultimately affirmed through the robot's choices under pressure. By making ethics actionable rather than rhetorical, the film provides young viewers with a model of moral behavior that is aspirational without being preachy. The final shot of the film, the yellow Camaro crossing the Golden Gate Bridge alongside a red semi-truck framed against a sunset sky, functions as both closure and invocation. It closes the story of Charlie and the robot while invoking the larger saga that will follow, the adventures that will eventually lead to the 2007 film and beyond. This dual function, satisfying the standalone narrative while honoring the franchise architecture, is the balancing act that the entire film has performed, crystallized into a single, iconic image. The film's fundamental optimism, its belief that connection is possible across any barrier and that broken things can be made whole through love and labor, represents a departure from the cynical, destruction-focused ethos of many contemporary blockbusters. It insists that the universe is not indifferent, that sentient beings have obligations to one another, and that the smallest acts of kindness can ripple outward to affect the fate of worlds. The relationship between the film's scale and its budget represents a philosophical choice as much as a financial one. By working with a smaller budget than previous franchise entries, the filmmakers were forced to prioritize character interaction over spectacle proliferation, to earn their action sequences through dramatic buildup rather than deploying them as default punctuation. This constraint became a creative virtue, producing a film that feels intimate even at its most expansive, personal even at its most cosmic. The film's depiction of the Autobot code of ethics, which prohibits harming sentient life regardless of species, establishes a moral framework that distinguishes the heroes from the villains with philosophical clarity. This code is not merely stated but demonstrated, tested, and ultimately affirmed through the robot's choices under pressure. By making ethics actionable rather than rhetorical, the film provides young viewers with a model of moral behavior that is aspirational without being preachy. The final shot of the film, the yellow Camaro crossing the Golden Gate Bridge alongside a red semi-truck framed against a sunset sky, functions as both closure and invocation. It closes the story of Charlie and the robot while invoking the larger saga that will follow, the adventures that will eventually lead to the 2007 film and beyond. This dual function, satisfying the standalone narrative while honoring the franchise architecture, is the balancing act that the entire film has performed, crystallized into a single iconic image. The film's fundamental optimism, its belief that connection is possible across any barrier and that broken things can be made whole through love and labor, represents a departure from the cynical, destruction-focused ethos of many contemporary blockbusters. It insists that the universe is not indifferent, that sentient beings have obligations to one another, and that the smallest acts of kindness can ripple outward to affect the fate of worlds. This worldview, presented without irony or apology, is perhaps the film's most radical aspect, a sincere affirmation of hope in a genre that often confuses darkness with sophistication. The robot's journey from amnesiac fugitive to Earth's appointed guardian parallels Charlie's journey from grieving daughter to self-possessed young adult, the two arcs braided together by the film's structure until they become inseparable. By the conclusion, it is impossible to say which character has given more to the other, because their growth has been mutual, their healing reciprocal. This parity of influence, this refusal to position one as savior and the other as saved, represents the film's final and most profound argument. That true friendship is not hierarchical but horizontal, a meeting of equals who make each other whole.